Hi, this is Jennie Walker, and welcome to I'm Not Old, I'm Archival. Today, I have a special guest with me. Her name is Gianna Corvino. She's the owner of the New York Archive, and they specialize in, guess what? Amazing designer vintage shoes. And I'm going to have her tell us all about her company, what she has going on these days, because she's expanding here and yonder and all over the place. So I thought I better grab her fast before she gets too big and get her on my podcast to tell me about where she's headed, where she's going, and a special event she has coming up for New York Fashion Week. Hello, Gianna.
Hi, Jenny. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. This is a new podcast, so I think you're guest number 2
And
so
it's an
far.
honor.
Thank you so much. And well, it's really easy to reach out to people that I already know because we met like a year or so ago in LA when you were out
Yes.
there. And so we've stayed in touch and we've been at vintage shows together. But I thought you were a natural person to have on here, especially since you've got an event coming up for New York Fashion Week I want to talk about. But can you tell the listeners all about who you are and the New York Archive?
Yes, I would love to. So, I'm Gianna. I'm the founder of the New York Archive, like Jenny said. It's a designer vintage brand centered around shoes. And I have a showroom on the Upper East Side. It's actually right outside of my childhood home. So, the same room that is the showroom was actually my childhood bedroom.
Oh,
So, a
wow.
big part of the brand is about capturing nostalgia and really allowing women a space to step into where they can feel like they're playing dress up in adulthood. And there was no piece for me that, embodied that more than the perfect pair of shoes. When I was a young girl, I remember going through my mom's closet and just being in awe of all of the high heels and just waiting for the day that my feet fit into them. Unfortunately, my mother's a 6, and so at size 13, when I slipped my mom's shoes on and they fit me, I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing. Like I'm never growing anymore. All of her shoes fit me now. Like I can wear these to school." Unfortunately, I had, like, just hit puberty, and now I'm a size 9, and so
Oh, no.
all of those shoes aren't
Uh,
available to me. But it was, the most fabulous feeling in the world to feel like a piece of clothing could totally transform how you see yourself and how you present yourself to the world. So when I realized that I wanted to work in fashion, I wanted to create something that really was able to share that feeling with others, and that's kind of how the New York Archive was born.
Well, I love that you are focused on shoes, and I love that you played in your mama's closet because I did the same. It is very fascinating when you're a young woman or a young girl and, you're going through and you're just, kind of admiring everything and just
Yeah.
knowing that it's not anything that you have at this time, and just seeing how special it is and all of that. Now, you have a special focus on shoes. Now, I'm known for my focus on Moschino and
Yes.
so I love the fact that you focus because it's kind of unusual. It's an unusual thing to do, but more people's trying to find their niche in vintage and in fashion. So how did you come to the concept of I'm going to
I'm gonna
focus
focus
just
just
on designer shoes?
So I was really tapping into the story that I just told you about, really feeling pulled to my mother's collection. But beyond that, I mean, to your point, I really was analyzing the market and I didn't really see anyone else just focusing on shoes. Or if they did, it wasn't to the scale at which I do it. And the price point was different. And so I felt like there was this untapped potential to be able to have a showroom that just focused on shoes at affordable prices. My average price range is around 300 or $350. And the shoes that I was finding online, and the small brands that were, focusing on shoes had an average price point of 600 or $700. And so it felt like this was really overlooked. And, beyond that, it's really hard for editorial or stylist work to find someone that does, just shoes as well. Most collections don't focus on that. And so it's also opened up a whole host of opportunities for us to really get involved in a ton of creative projects that we probably wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And, that wasn't necessarily the intention going into it, but it was something that, quickly evolved once this business began. And it's become one of my most, loved parts. I love being able to collaborate to bring different creative visions to life, whether it be through, the same magazines that I flipped through growing up, or if it's to put someone on a red carpet or a photo shoot or whatever it may be, you know, it's hard to find good footwear.
Right. Well, I want to ask you a couple of things about this footwear. Now, one is I'm looking at a beautiful editorial photo of your feet wearing some Manolos that made famous in the TV show Sex and the City. But are there some favorite brands? Like, I mean, obviously you sell more than one brand in there. So, like, are there some favorites? Can you talk about what's trending? Because for a long time, recently, the most recent past, shall we say, and in present, Y2K has been
Mhm.
super hot. But there are other things that people are drawn to in shoes. So can you kind of talk about what's the status of vintage shoes these days?
Absolutely. So, because of the resurgence of Sex in the City and the big anniversary that they had about a year ago, everyone did want to be Carrie Bradshaw, which I totally understand. The first time I got my Manolos, I had one pair to my name, and I felt the most confident I ever had in my life. I was like, literally, no one can talk to me. I am Sarah Jessica Parker. Like, it was so transformative. And so, I think that because of the show's popularity, there have been so many girls that have come in and also asked for private sourcing to find pieces from the show that they've resonated with. So the iconic Carrie heel, the D'Orsay pump with, the rhinestone embellishment on the front, that's always really big. The Manolo Mary Jane, which was supposed to be the urban shoe myth, that is incredibly popular. And there's people who ask almost every week for us to source them a pair, which is so funny. But beyond that, I think that people also really covet heritage brands, and also things that are incredibly aspirational. They always love the Chanel ballet flat. Chanel loafers were really, really trending over the last year. And, that's something that we can barely keep on the shelves. But, it's so funny. These different trends are so much inspired by old media to kind of ground a new audience who is really looking towards, television and film to tell them what's in style. The Dior Lock and Key mules have been very popular, have been trending, and also a lot of Miu Miu, shockingly enough.
Yeah, that's very popular right now. Well, I will say at my most recent vintage show, I sold a only worn once pair of Chanel combat boots.
Whoa.
And the woman who bought them said, "I've been looking for combat boots by Chanel, and I've just, can't find anything, can't find anything." And she found these, and they were probably a half size too big, but she's like, "I don't care. I'll wear
Yeah.
2 pair of
When
socks."
someone loves something enough, they'll make it work. They'll put a pad in the shoe, they'll wear ski socks, whatever they need to do.
Absolutely. Well, that's an interesting point when it comes to your shoes. What are some of the things you've had to do so that they could fit? Because I know with vintage clothes, which I mostly sell, there's always a fit issue, and I think
Mhm.
it's a myth to think that it's all gonna fit you perfectly when it's been altered or it's been worn. In the case of shoes, like, you might have someone who has a thicker ankle or, they've got a second toe longer than the first,
Yeah.
or it's a little big or it's a little small, like, what or the heel's too high, like, what are some of the adjustments that people have done to make the shoe not only fit, but, it basically customizes it?
So I always say to the girls that come into the showroom that the biggest asset that you could have is a good cobbler. We've seen cobblers create entire custom toe pads in the front so that the shoe fits when it's not your size. Makes it like also a little more comfortable so that there's no rubbing. But for girls that are trying to fit in what's probably about a half size to a size too big, there's adjustments to be made in the front and the back to try and make it fit you more securely. But we've also seen shoes totally, cut down on the heel and then restructured to be a kitten heel when it was originally a stiletto. A good cobbler who's good at their craft can really make a ton of adjustments. But I will say, that is something that is a barrier to scaling in this niche because pieces are not only one of one, but sizing is a factor. So, you can kind of get away with a half size to a size discrepancy. But if you're a size 6 and you love something that's a size 9, unfortunately, there's not very much that can be done, which is why I also offer private sourcing. Because I
Got it.
hate to watch a girl come in here and fall in love with a piece that you can't take home.
Oh, I come across that at every vintage show that I do. I do wanna ask you about condition because Um, I know for me, when I'm sourcing my vintage that I am so concerned about condition that,
Mhm.
I mean, I'll send things back. I'm like, I get a lot of compliments because it is in such great condition and people are really amazed at that. And, with shoes, I mean, you've got, obviously the most wear shows up on the sole, the heel, and the
Mhm.
insole. And yet, with all the carefulness I have implemented, there'll be people who are like, "I don't care." And
Yeah,
you're, like, surprised. Like, I once sold this is true story. I once had this Moschino leather coat that had a dog bite in the pocket. I'm not even kidding.
you're lying.
I'm not even kidding. The whole had a whole chunk that had been bitten out of the side. And I was able to source it for $5, okay? This is a true story. And I thought, "Okay, for $5, there's surely something I can do to this, right? There's something that
Mhm.
I could put a patch on it or, like, there's so many creative things that people do now where you can, like, stitch it up or whatever."
Yeah.
And, I remember I was having a clearance sale in my apartment, in Pasadena before I moved to New York, and I just, kinda put it out there, I put it out in the sale. And they could not this person could not wait to buy this coat with the
Oh my
dog bite in the
god.
pocket. It looked amazing on her too, like, it looked amazing. And she bought it, and I made it I mean, it sold for a lot. I mean, I think it sold for, like, $200, but, which is extraordinary in and of itself. But then I later saw her at another sale I was doing because 'cause I've done some estate sales in the past,
Mhm.
hosted them, and she came and she goes, "Oh, remember me? I bought the coat." I said, "Oh, the one with the dog bite." And she's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, did you fix it?" And she says, "No, I never did anything about it. I just wear it like it is. I think it adds character." So I'm
I
always
love that.
amazed with that, with vintage, that I'm just so worried it has to be perfect that I will turn things away. But what I've learned is that I am stressing for no reason, that there's a lot of, there's a lot of wiggle room and there's a lot of room for people who, it's like, it's okay. It's vintage, it's going to have a little,
Mhm.
signs of life. So can you tell me how that translates into selling the shoes?
Absolutely. And I do think so much for people like you and me who truly want to create an archive and want to create, an incredible experience where it feels like you're almost walking into another world or a museum. There is always the pressure of, I want to put forth the best pieces that look like no one has ever touched them before. But, to your point, these are pieces that have lived lives, prior to the ones that they found with us and before they go to their final home. And so, it is something where I've started to realize, especially for shoes, that what's most important is that they don't fall apart while you're wearing them. And
Right.
I think that there was a little bit of a learning curve at first where, you know, I would find shoes that looked perfect. They looked pristine and unworn. And then, I would try and do a little bit of quality control and I would bring them to a studio and kind of try and walk around in them and put down, notes for the condition and things like that. And the heel caps would just deteriorate.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I was like, this piece that looked perfect to me had, issues with structural integrity. And so now, I always take the pieces to the cobbler, even if I don't think that they need any repairs, because they always can be cleaned up.
Right.
And I think that that's always an important investment when, especially dealing with shoes, because it's not like a bag or a coat or something that doesn't have as much pressure or wear on it. You're putting, especially on the New York City streets, my God, your feet in them and running out into the world, and they are getting, banged up. And so it is important, like I was saying, to have a relationship with a cobbler that you trust to be able to not only cover up any cosmetic imperfections that come with the pieces, but to make sure that they are structurally integral. And that's something that has been most important to me. As long as there are imperfections on items, obviously that doesn't make me happy, but if they're good to be worn and they can live a long life after that, that's more what I prioritize.
Well, it's basically the refurbishment part of all of this, and, it's actually kind of exciting. I mean, I know for myself over the years, before I was into this, I always had this wonderful feeling when I'd pick up my favorite pair of boots that had just come back from the cobbler with the brand new
Yeah,
heel, and there's something really cool about, um fixing a shoe, you know what I mean?
absolutely.
Especially your favorite pair, and most recently, I had sourced a vintage pair of 1990s really rare shoes by Moschino that were patent leather, like loafers with a block heel and then a little big red heart in the middle. It was just insane, and, so when I got them, there was a little, chip on the I guess that plastic heel on the bottom,
Mhm.
and it had kinda come off in the box. I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, I wonder if I can glue that back on or whatever." So, I glued it back on instead of taking him to the cobbler, okay? So, I
Yeah.
put him in the next vintage show, and everyone tried these on. They're like a 6.5, so everybody couldn't fit them. And this one woman, she like, the heel literally came off on the floor, the other half of it, and so I said, "Well" it literally came off. I said, "Well, let me see the other one." And so I literally touched the other one and it came off too. So basically that plastic, what's it been, 30, 40 years? I mean,
Yeah.
has disintegrated and
Yeah.
is not structurally sound. Now it's an easy fix, but it was interesting that I did not immediately take that. I thought about it and I thought I should really take these to the cobbler and get them fixed. And I thought, well, but they look okay. So
Well, it's one
it
of those
just
things, they do look fine, you
yeah,
know?
and it just lit and I'm just, like, horrified, right? Because here I am, so worried about condition, and the heel is, like, just disintegrating in the cu with the customer right there, and I'm like, "Okay, well, I can give you a little discount to go to the shoe repair shop," but instead, they didn't buy them, and instead, I now have to take them, and it's fine. It was just hilarious to have it break down, and I know for my buttons, you've got thread on these
Yeah.
jackets and literally the button the coat, it will literally come right off in their hand,
Well, and
and
those
it's
are things
because
that have
it's
happened to all of us.
yeah, the cotton thread is 30, 40, 50 years old, right? So
Yeah.
it has served its purpose, but that's I thought it was pretty funny. I do
It
wanna
is
talk
really
about Mary
funny.
Janes. I used to have 2 pair of the infamous Mary Janes. I had a black pair and a teal. They were both patent leather.
Ugh,
And I
love.
think I wore them both, like, once or twice just because, it's a very high heel,
Yeah, it
and,
is.
they're sitting shoes, as my mama used to call them, you can't really
Absolutely.
move in them, like, out to the cab, you get to where you go, but they were never really comfortable on me because of the heel height, but I had them and I thought they were beautiful, and I did feel transformed. Absolutely, I felt just like that image of Carrie Bradshaw's character staring at the Manolos and, like, having a
Yeah.
about to pass out, and that's exactly how I felt in those shoes, and that show, Sex and the City, and the sequel, um,
And just like that.
yeah, yes, and just like that, they have done more than anybody to promote women's shoes. I mean, it's
Yes.
wonderful because and now, like, we also have people who feel that way about handbags, right? And so that's,
Yes.
it's a whole thing for women that have experienced, and, different times in my life, I was more focused on it, and so it's
Mhm.
interesting as I've gotten older and, the condition of the feet changes over time. Ladies, I'm
Yeah.
just here to tell you, as you get older, those 4 and 5-inch heels, seem impossible, but over time, like, you kinda shift your focus, away from certain things. It meant a lot in its moment, and then, like, now it's like, I like a good handbag and a good necklace, and that's about but as far as shoes, I can only dream, 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 dream. So what are, some of the hot shoes that you have on your to find list?
Ugh, I truly dream about the Chanel slingbacks with the ladybug on the front.
Oh, a
I don't know
ladybug.
I don't know if you have seen them or if you know what I'm talking about immediately, but you'll have to look it up. They are, an early 2000s collection that also came out with a, quilted handbag that also had, the ladybug motif on it, but They are just these adorable slingbacks with a little ladybug on the front that went super viral a few years ago, and I think that they are so damn darling. I feel like I have to have them.
Well, I'm sitting here Googling them as we're talking, and they're as much as $3,000 online, and yes,
They
they are
are.
adorable. This is I've never seen them before. Now, I will say that, Moschino did, a similar, style with ladybugs on it, but,
Mhm.
probably around the same time. They probably copied, what they did and came out with their own version. I've never seen this shoe. Here's
They're
someone who
so
wants
cute.
4 grand for these shoes.
I know, it's crazy.
2,700, 3,100, and $3,900, just 3 little listings, that I see. Well, I hope you find those really quick. They're adorable. I've
You and
never
me both.
never seen those. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
really
I'm
exciting.
always keeping my eyes peeled to find them for a good price. If I can find them for under $1,000, I would have to bring them home.
Absolutely. I mean, those are incredible, incredible. And that is amazing. What else is on your radar?
Well, it was funny. I From the time that I got started, I had coveted the Dior Gambler heels. And honestly, it was something that I wanted to put on my personal archive list. And they're never in my size. I'm a size 9, like I said. And so there's a lot of, beautiful, very popular pieces that will never cross my desk. Like a size nine's life is a little difficult, but that's why I also, try and include a large range of sizes here at the New York Archive because I know the difficulty of loving a piece and not being able to find it for you. But this August, I finally found the ones I was looking for in my size for
Wow.
$500.
Wow.
And I was like, this is the best day of my life. Can I overnight these? What can I do to get them in my hands immediately? And they are truly one of my most precious pieces. But I would love to find another pair of those that I can put in the archive.
Absolutely.
Because truly the feeling that I had putting them on, it was insane. You should have heard me justifying it with my mother. We're like sitting in her bathroom. She's sitting at her vanity, putting her makeup on, and I'm like, I think I need them. And she's like, "You do. I think you do need them." She's like, This is your job." I'm like,
It's
"It
your
is
job.
my job." I'm like, "But I could never sell them." She was
That's
like
okay.
she was like, "But if you had to, you could." I was like, "I could never."
Well, the way I look at it and I tell people is, my whole motto is create your own archive. And
Yes.
that's basically what you're doing by finding this rare piece and holding on to it. It's museum quality. It's exhibition worthy.
Yes. Absolutely.
So let me ask you about this. You have expanded into a lot of things, which is so exciting for me
Yes.
to see because I just think it's great when someone who's reselling or uh, moves into all these other areas. So you have a podcast. You also have started something called Sip and Shop, and you've got one coming up during New York Fashion Week. You're also um,
Yes.
selling your own T-shirts now that are branded that you've been
Yes.
able to get on some celebrities. Do you wanna kinda go into any of those or actually go
Yeah.
into all of them, pick your
Yeah.
favorite. Pick your favorite first.
Absolutely. To be completely candid, this wasn't my background. I went to business school and I was working at a startup in food and beverage. And I ended up really learning the ropes of the business to the point where by the time I left, I was their director of operations. And I realized what I really loved was brand building. And so when it was time for me to leave, I actually started what is now, my full-fledged vintage business as a portfolio to apply to go back to business school
Hmm,
because I knew that I wanted to transition into fashion and I didn't want to end up being a 27-year-old intern still steaming and fetching coffee. And I it's a hard industry to break into when you don't have the experience and it's something where you always really have to pay your dues and I hadn't yet and I felt like I had kind of missed the opportunity to get involved. So I really like dreamt up this big brand that was multifaceted and really transformed, the client or the customer into feeling like they entered a different world. And, that, like I was saying earlier, is grounded in, the very euphoric feeling of being a child and playing dress up. And so I've kind of built out this secondary brand to, the vintage that I'm selling, focused on this idea of you are the coolest woman that you know. And so that's what our baby tees say. They say the coolest woman you know. And it's kind of a phrase that my friends and I would throw around as a joke to inspire confidence in each other. When we would put on an outfit that was a little outrageous or a little too loud, and, the immediate feeling is like, I should probably tone this down. Why? You're literally the coolest woman I know. Like, why would you ever tone yourself down? And so it's kind of like this token of celebration. And
Got it.
so it also evolved into a series where we were interviewing some of the coolest women that we know, people that we were able to work with as a brand and build a relationship with, that we wanted to celebrate and, be able to build up and, pay back some of the opportunities that they had given us, whether it be, entry into editorial world that we didn't necessarily think we would, have access to, or whether it be, access to a celebrity or whatever it may be. It was always very important to me to foster those relationships and also like give people a platform to tell their own story. And so, I've been able to try to continue to build this world. And that's also where the sip and shops have come into play. I want people to be able to really enter the space and see the pieces for themselves. And so I now host these monthly events that bring people into the world of the New York Archive. Most recently, we did one right before the holidays. And there were a few hundred people in my New York City apartment,
Wow.
which was absolutely insane. There was a line in front of my residential building. And you can imagine in New York City, my super was not very happy.
Yes, I can imagine.
So
Wow.
we've now built up a partnership with Hot Studios, which is a creative practice and studio down on West 14th, which is where we're going to be hosting our monthly sip and shops moving forward so that I am not kicked out of my building.
No, no, that's a very wise move. Yes, yes, that is wild. So what happens at these sip-in shops? Now you've got one coming up during New York Fashion Week. It's February 7th, 2026, 11 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at 39 West 14th Street, New York 10011. So tell me all
Yes.
about this.
So the sip and shop is meant to be a day of, networking and having fun while shopping. And so you get to meet, other people in the industry and creatives and fellow vintage fashion lovers while being able to not only discover our archive, but for this particular event, we're bringing four other vendors to the space as well to be able to share their archives and to really create a immersive experience where people can find the pieces that they'll want to wear to New York Fashion Week events, or really just find a place to get the hell out of this New York City cold that has been so incredibly oppressive.
Yes.
And we'll have prosecco and bites like we usually do to really make it feel like people are welcome. There's something that is always said about how luxury fashion can feel kind of exclusionary. And, I want the space to feel warm and inviting. And I want people to feel like, maybe some pieces are aspirational for them, but they're still invited in the space. And that's something that's been, very important to us. We have kind of cultivated a bit of a younger audience, at least initially. And there were so many young girls, whether they be FIT students or from Parsons, who are saying that this brand and what it creates is so aspirational for them. And so these events kind of give a touch point for them to be able to experience the world a little bit on their terms, which has been really nice.
Well, you made a really good point because vintage and pre-owned, whether it's luxury or not luxury, is a gateway for a lot of
Yeah,
people to get into luxury for the first time that is not in reach currently. And,
absolutely.
so many of the brands are afraid of it, and they shouldn't be. They should be embracing it because, I've seen it personally that I'll put it this way, there are a couple ways I've seen it work in my own life in terms of when I had a consignment shop in Pasadena and when I'm at my pop-ups is that you'll have it was always the same woman who could afford to buy it in the store at full price,
Mhm.
who was in my store buying it at a discount, right? So,
Absolutely.
it's the same person. It's just they're what they love is
It's the hunt.
they love the hunt, they love something that is unique and different. They love the fact that, you know, they can save a little money, right? So, they do like a deal a lot of times, but it's more than that, and it is I saw a woman buy, a Louis Vuitton Speedy for her daughter for her high school graduation, and it was like baby's first Louis Vuitton, kinda thing,
Yeah,
and so that's her gateway into owning the product even though it's used, and I think it's does nothing but pave the way for
absolutely.
people to experience this at a younger age, maybe earlier than they would normally be able to afford in their lifetime, and then, kind of work their way up through the system, so to speak, to where they are
Yeah,
buying it, full price in the store. And it is aspirational for some people, completely aspirational, even the vintage, even when it is on sale or discounted. But the bottom line is people love quality, quality shoes,
absolutely.
quality bags. And to get the quality, you have to kind of go back in time and avoid the
Mhm.
fast fashion cycle. And
Yeah,
so many of these brands have lasted 20, 30, 40, 50 years because they were made so
exactly.
well to begin with.
Yeah. And it's so different now, and I think that, the younger generation are the ones paving the way for the big boom that we're going to continue to see in the vintage industry as people continue to move further away from the fast fashion cycle. And so the hope is to create a space that's welcoming for them now. And some pieces may be aspirational, but we want to create lifelong shoppers and lifelong relationships with people who are trying to indoctrinate in this luxury vintage space. So even if they have to save up for, their dream piece, it's so important that we try and cultivate that now as the industry continues to grow. Because, these are the people that in 5 to 10 years' time, is probably closer to our target audience.
Well, let me ask you this, Gianna. So, are you still doing the vintage shows, or are you only doing the sip and shops now? What kind of where are you with all of that?
So I am still participating in some of the vintage shows. And I know that you and I have talked about this previously, but basically the idea for these sip and shops was kind of born out of the fact that some of my initial success in this industry came from my participation in those vintage shows fairly regularly. And for someone that was breaking into this industry and breaking out of having a corporate job, I truly remember doing my first Manhattan Vintage show and never having made that much money in one day before in my entire life.
Yeah, it's eye opening.
And I was like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna vomit." Like like, there is literally nothing like that experience. And I think that, like, to some degree, it alters your brain chemistry because we're continued to be fed this narrative of there's, only a certain amount of paths that a person is supposed to take. And, we're so focused on the idea of, having a traditional career path. And I felt so chained to having a paycheck and having that stability. And when doing my first Manhattan Vintage show, I was like breaking it down in my mind of like, this is 10 paychecks or like this is 15 paychecks. I was like, how could I ever go back to a real job?
Right.
Not that this isn't a real job, but you know what I mean.
The corporate America, yeah. I get
Yeah.
it.
And I think that that feeling, I was like, I have to do as many of these shows as physically possible. And I caught like the bug. And I was doing truly as many shows as I could. But it's, I think, a very hard thing for us small business owners to parse is our success becomes dependent on the success of those shows. And, that's hard because there's a lot of variables that go into putting on a good show. and whether or not a show weekend is going to be successful or not. There have been weekends where I've done a show that magically there was a protest outside, that we didn't anticipate
Oh my
happening, or
gosh.
and I'm like, where is everyone? And they can't get on the block because the block siphoned off.
Oh, wow, wow.
There are
Well,
so many things that, go into the behind the scenes that we have no control over. And I think that towards the end of my first full year of literally ODing on doing shows, I was like, I feel like I need to put some of the power back into my own hands.
got it, got it. Well, that is a very interesting take on it because it is a very condensed selling moment, right? It's
Yeah,
2 and sometimes, 3 days or 2.5 days, sometimes they're 1 day, and it's just this truncated moment where hundreds of people are coming by and seeing what you have and to have the ability to experience and buy it, and it is kind of shocking as what's I'll tell you what's really shocking is to think that you're one vendor of 100
absolutely.
and they've all had probably a similar experience. In your one
Absolutely.
show in one town, it kind of gives you a sense of what the billions of dollars in the retail industry just for resale is really like.
A
And
hundred
you're just
percent.
a little segment of it. But I like the idea of doing something that's independent and that you can control and build out. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and like I said, like there is something about doing those shows where there is such a rush, and I am so very grateful for the opportunities that I've had because of them. But I think that we're at an interesting intersection where the show circuit is changing, and it's expanding and it's moving to other markets, and I think it will be interesting to see where it goes.
Be very interesting because there are a lot more vintage dealers than there ever were, and a lot more
Yeah.
people selling vintage than ever before. And they have been trained. They have trained themselves by selling online on Depop or
Yep.
Mercari and Poshmark or eBay. And now it's sort of like, how do I take it to the next level? Well, I'm going to do a vintage show and have
Mhm.
that experience. And those shows don't work for everybody, but they work for a
No.
lot of people. And I
Yeah.
think it's a lot of financial investment into the show. And so you've got to have a product with an average price point that's high enough
Mhm.
so that you can sell enough for that, to be profitable. And that is a lesson you learn in the experience. Like the first time I did a show was Manhattan Vintage. They were the first person to, it was the first show I ever applied to, and
Mhm.
they accepted me, and I was so excited. And I was living at the time in Pasadena, California. I'm like, how in the world am I going to do this? I will figure it out. I have
Yeah.
no idea. It was so funny. I overthink everything. Notoriously, it's my signature move. And I'm like, do I need a freight forwarding company? Like,
Oh my god.
how do I get my inventory there? These were actual thoughts that I had, and I did talk to people, and I was overcomplicating everything. But and anyway, I went through all the things of shipping my things up and storing them at the venue and all this stuff. But what was interesting is I was shocked at the amount of money I made in 2.5 days. But
Yeah.
everyone and I had this niche, which was just Moschino, and it was the response was off the charts, and I made a lot of money, and people really appreciated the experience. It felt like they were in a
Mhm.
museum. But everyone kept saying, because, they were like, "If you diversify, you will make more money."
Yeah.
So the finally I gave into it. I was like, "Okay." And so I, had, half and it was like a half and half, or
Mhm.
like 3 racks of, I think it was 7 racks at the show, 3 racks of non-Moschino, 4 racks of Moschino, and my sales doubled.
Wow.
And I still sold the same number of units, or dollar amount, like the same amount of Moschino, but now
Mhm.
I was making twice as much because I had a whole other
Yeah.
opportunity for people to buy from me by having the other brands like Mugler and
Mhm.
McQueen and all the logical suspects. And I was like, oh, okay, now I see, right? And so it's a learning. So
Yeah,
I went from
absolutely.
making money to making a significant amount of money, right?
Yeah,
And so that was just so eye opening for me. And everyone who does a show eventually has to figure that out for themselves. Is
totally.
it the right brand? Is it the right price point? Do I negotiate in the moment? Do I not? Like, what do
Yeah.
I do? You have to figure it out. But But yeah, I think it's a really interesting space, the whole show circuit, and one I am fully entrenched in, and
Yeah.
uh, doing not a normal market shows. I've been doing the Manhattan Vintage shows, and both of them, as you were saying, are expanding, and they're doing
Hmm.
like shows in like in Miami and in Austin and Nashville, and they have plans to do things in like San Francisco and Chicago and even internationally. So it's really an exciting time to be a part of for vintage. Well, Gianna, I really appreciate talking to you. Is there anything you want to leave us with? I do want people to know how to find you and how to connect with you. I think you've got this Instagram page where if you'll tell people what the address is or a website, just tell people how to connect with you so they can find out about you now and long term, these sip and shops, coming to some of these events. I will be at your event. I'm
I
going to
can't
pop in,
wait.
gonna pop in, see, get the scoop, see what's going on this weekend. And yeah, just let people know how to connect with you and we'll take it from there.
That sounds great. Thank you so much again for having me. And I can't wait to see you this weekend. For anyone listening who wants to keep up with the New York Archive, I would say that everything's really centralized to our Instagram, which is at the NY Archive. And the link to our website is in the bio. We also are posting our Coolest Woman series on there, but it's transcribed on Substack and YouTube, also at the New York Archive and on TikTok as well. So, those are all of the places that you can find me online, and you can find me one Saturday a month at Hot Studios for our sip and shops. And I just can't wait to share all of the things that are coming down the pipeline with us. But thank you again so much for giving me the space to share a little bit about the New York Archive and the story behind it. It has been such a pleasure.
Oh, well, thank you, John. I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story and letting people hear a little bit about what you're doing in this space that we both love so much. And that's it. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. This is Jennie Walker, your host of I'm Not Old, I'm Archival, and we look forward to having you on a future episode. Bye now.
Bye.